All right, everybody turn to page 449 with me. We're going to talk about how to figure a principal and interest payment. P&I.
I'm sorry, what page was that, Jan?
449, it's in unit 15, but this is a chart that I want to explain to you because we're gonna need to know what these mortgage factors mean. So look at the figure 15.2. The first thing is the name of the chart is mortgage factor chart. That could be called a loan factor chart. It could be called an interest rate factor chart. And so the numbers we're going to be looking at are factors. They're numbers that have an interest rate in it and an amount of time. So it's a factor that is dealing with the time value of money, and we're going to see how it works in making a payment and how it works in amortizing the loan that we borrow. So look at your heading right above the chart. Equal monthly debt service payment to amortize a loan of $1,000. I want you to make sure you highlight debt service. We will use that terminology. The P&I payment is called debt service. You're serving the debt, servicing the debt by paying back the principal to the lender and paying back the interest to use their money at X amount of interest rate for X amount of time. So in other words, here's what this means. Look at the first column, you see interest rate 4%. Slide your finger all the way over to 30-year term, and you see 4.78. What they're saying is, for every $1,000 you borrow at 4% for 30 years, the factor is 4.78. That 4.78 will give us the payment, and the payment will amortize systematically over 30 years. So in the 30th year, it will work out to zero and you don't owe any more on your loan. So 1,000, if you borrow that, times 4.78 will tell you your payment will be, I might have done that wrong.
But you need to multiply by 12 or by 30.
No.
Oh, for the whole thing.
Yeah, for a 1,000 times, no, I beg your pardon. How many thousands are in 1,000? Because we're paying, if you borrow 1,000 and we are paying $4.78 for every 1,000 you borrow, you're borrowing 1,000, right? And so it would be 1 times 4.78. So your payment will be $4.78 if you borrow just $1,000 and you want to spread out the payment plan for 30 years. That means you're making a payment every month, 360 payments. Now that's kind of silly to think about it that way, but that's how the chart works. So let's make it more realistic. What if you go to the bank and what if we go to the bank and say, I want to borrow $95,000. So the first step is, how many thousands do you want the bank to lend you? So if you divide by 1,000, you want $1,000, right? So visualize walking in the bank as a store and they've got a shelf with $1,000 on it. Like if you go to the grocery store, I want 95 of them. Each one of these will cost $4.78 a month, and that will amortize, which means reduce your debt over 30 years until it gets to zero. So 95 times 4.78 gives you your P&I payment of $454.10. So is that making a little bit of sense? There has to be this factor, this number. It's an algorithm number that's got the interest rate in it. That's not an interest rate. It's just a factor number to multiply times the amount of money you want to borrow. And we borrow in $1,000, don't we? And so you would multiply that, and that particular number is going to give a payment that spreads out the payment plan for 30 years. Let's look at the 4% for 15 years. The factor is 7.40, isn't it? Was it 740? Okay, 740. So if we want to borrow 95 of those 1,000s, let's see what the payment would be. And you get 703? That's a pretty big difference to shorten the amount of time on your loan. But if you shorten the amount of time, you're going to shorten the amount of interest that you pay on the loan. So if you borrow $95,000, $1,000, and the factor at 4% for 15 years will obviously be more than the factor for 30 years would be. And so your P&I payment, called the debt service, would be 703. Does that make a little bit of sense? So knowing how to get the P&I payment is really important for us to know right now. So I want to show you something else. What if this borrower says, I want you to figure, let's say he's talking to the banker, I want you to tell me what my payment will be for 30 years. And the banker tells him, I want you to tell me what my payment would be for 15 years. And the bank tells him. And so the next question might be, well, so what would I save by paying on 15 years? I'm making such a bigger house payment. Well, let me show you the formula for figuring interest over the life of the loan. And it's really easy. So let me erase some of this, and we'll put back some of those numbers. So one payment was $454.10, and one payment was $703. Even. So those are the two payments. If you're comparing how much interest will I pay if I finance for 30 years, how much interest will I pay if I finance for 15 years, what you do is you take your P&I payment for each one. So this was 30 years, wasn't it? So I'm going to say times 30 times 12, what you were talking about, Elizabeth, and multiply that out. And on the 703, we'll do 15 times 12 to figure out what we're paying back to the lender. So $454.10. You can say times 360 if you want to in one step. And so the payback to the lender, the total payback is $163,476. In that $163,476 is the $95,000 that we borrowed. So minus $95,000, because we're looking for how much did the interest cost. So minus $95,000, and the interest we're paying the bank for using their money for 30 years is $68,000. So does everybody understand that? If you borrow 95, you got to pay it back, don't you? The lender says, pay us back what you owe, what you borrowed, and the rest of it is interest because you used our money for 30 years. and you use it for 30 years and we charge 4%. So you almost paid as much in interest as you did in principal. The total payback was $163,476, which means the total P&I you paid. Out of that is what you borrowed, called the principal, and out of that is the interest. So let's compare it to the 703 times 15 years times 12. Did you get 126,540? So 126,540 is that right?
31,540.
If I minus it,
Just 31.
that's, oh,
Powers of Apple.
my what?
31.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Look at there, everybody. This buyer, if he can shorten that term, and if he can afford 703 versus 454, now that's a big jump. If somebody's borrowing 95,000, that would be a big jump in the house payment, I would think. But look how much they save in interest. They save 37,000 almost, don't they, in interest? That's pretty good to know. Now, most people that, well, most of the students today said, you can always set your loan up on a 30-year amortization plan and pay in every month or whenever you get the money a little bit toward the principal and start paying it off as you can. Now, that might be more palatable for most of us instead of being stuck in a higher payment for 15 years that, you know, where you're just stuck in a higher payment. But I would wager once you get that 703 payment, you'll get used to it and budget, and then you're probably going to get a raise or money's going to come in. And, you know, if you could swing it, that would be really neat to have your house paid off in 15 years. Because in 15 years, if you're a young person getting married, your kids will be going to college pretty soon. And then after that, you're going to be planning for retirement, and all of that is big money stuff. So that's kind of neat right there. So what you learned is how to get a P&I payment. You use the mortgage factor that they give you. You will not be given a chart like this. They'll just say, here's the loan factor. And you need to know what that term means, and it means that's how you calculate the P&I payment. And then you learned how to get interest over the life of the loan. You just take your P&I payment, multiply it by the number of payments you will be making, and then you minus what you borrowed. And that leaves the interest that you paid by keeping that loan for X amount of time. So do this with me. Go with me back to page 424. And I want us to look at a couple of these math problems. So I would like for you to look at number 28, and then let me give you some information first. If you go to the bank to borrow money, they might say, we would like to set your payment up on a pity payment is what lots of us say. It's a principal and interest and tax and insurance payment. What they're doing is escrowing for your tax and insurance every month. Think about it for a minute. If the lender collects 1/12 of your yearly tax bill, isn't that better than you paying it at the end of the year in one lump sum? Who's here? Who came in?
Me.
Who's me? Oh, hello. We don't like any surprises.
I was doing that for a second.
I was watching Hunter. He did see, I just saw him watching and I'm thinking, who came in? We're on, Courtney, we're on page 424.
Okay.
All right. And so if a lender says, we want to escrow your house payment, what they're saying is, yes, the principal and interest covers the debt, but we're gonna collect taxes and insurance every month in your payment too. In other words, you would hear it called a budgeted payment. What if your taxes were $3,600 a year? I need to get another marker. $3,600 tax bill coming at the end of the year, like in September when you're getting ready for the holidays. Most of us don't want to pay $3,600, so the lender might say, divide that by 12 and we'll collect $300 every month for your taxes, so you don't have to pay the whole bill later, which is a little bit risky. And then what if your insurance is $360 a year? They're gonna say divide that by 12, which is 30, isn't it? And so your escrow would be $330 added to your monthly P&I payment. The lender will collect it every month, and they'll put it into a reserve called an escrow reserve. So when the tax bill comes in September or August, the lender will get it. And the lender would have been collecting for 12 months, 1/12 every month, and they've got all that money in reserve, and they'll pay the bill. And the same for the taxes and the insurance. So if we think about the lender as an investor and the lender as a risk taker, then this will alleviate some of their risk if they know that that is going to be paid at the end of the year. Does that make sense? So the pity payment is an escrow payment. The principal and interest is the debt service. That's what your debt is. And the tax and insurance every month is really a convenience for the borrower, and it's less risk for the lender. If you go to the bank and borrow money and you're not putting down much payment, they will definitely escrow your payment, where they're saying we've got to collect taxes and insurance. So having said that, let's look at number 28. You've got this problem that you're going to get the information from, but I want to mention one more thing that was in your reading. You see that 85% LTV. LTV means loan to value. It's like saying they're getting an 85% loan. 85% out of the sales price, or 85% of the appraised value, whichever one is less, is what the lender will lend on. So see how you do on that math problem. Number 28. A lot of your finance math, you can use the T-bar if you've gotten used to doing that. And you can set it up that way if you on some of this. The first step, you got to get your loan amount. Did everybody get through that step? Everybody understand that? you're borrowing 85% out of the 100% sales price. So when you're getting something less than 100%, you're multiplying. So now that we know our loan amount, it should be smooth sailing after that. Is anybody stuck? Work on it a few more minutes. Is everybody good on the first step, getting the loan amount before you configure the payment? All right, so look at the second sentence. The term of the loan, 30 years at 7% interest rate. That's the terms of the loan. It will take a loan factor of 6.65 to amortize. What do we do with that loan factor? Do we multiply or divide? Multiply. So, let me put it up here. We're borrowing $150,000, aren't we? And I said that loan factor is based on every thousand that you want to borrow. What if we make the loan factor a decimal instead of dividing this out? Couldn't we, what was it, 6.65? Couldn't we have it 0.665 and just multiply that out? Guys, put 6.65 in your calculator. 6.65 and divide it by 1,000. That's the decimal version of 6.65 per thousand. So in other words, we can divide 153 by 1,000 and multiply that by 6.65. Or you can put it in the T and say we're borrowing 153,000 and we're multiplying it by that factor. And we turn the factor into a decimal by using the 1,000 there instead of dividing it. And so your P&I payment should be, is that what you get? 1017.45? All right, but that's not the question, is it? The question is, what's the total payment? Because the lender says we're going to collect taxes and insurance every month. What's wrong?
It should be 0.0065.
2 zeros? Oh, it should be. Thank you very much. Because if we move it over, it was there, and we're moving it over 3 places. Thank you, Elizabeth. And now if you multiply that out, you should get the 1017.45. Everybody good? Probably you like it this way. $153 times 6.65. And that gives you the same thing, doesn't it? So you could do it that way. I just wanted to show you in the T-bar because so much of your financing can be plugged into the T-bar. But if this is easier, just do it this way. Now, they're asking for the payment with taxes and insurance in it, so what would you do next? Terrell?
Find the interest, the taxes and the insurance. And then
Do what?
you said, what do you do next?
Uh-huh,
You find the taxes and the insurance.
uh-huh.
And inflation. And since it's annual, you would divide it by 12 to get the monthly rates and add that to the interest amount.
Terrell said that find the taxes and the insurance premium in the question, and so we've got 996, and we've got 480, so I'm probably gonna add them. You could do it separately if you wanted to, or you can add it. And Terrell said divide it by 12, because the lender wants to collect it every month. So divide that by 12, and you get 123, don't you? Guys, you could have said 996 divided by 12. You could have said 480 divided by 12 and add them up, or you can just say, I'm going to add this total and divide by 12. However you like to do your math. But the total payment is 1017 plus 123. So the answer is 1140.45, isn't it? So that's a pretty good test question. And what it's testing you on is a couple of things. Do you know what LTV means? So let me show you where that is in your book. So just hold your place, and I just want to show you where that is. And it's on page 411. So hold your place because we're going to go back. It says mortgages are based on loan-to-value ratio. Bottom of page 411. When you see the word ratio, ratio means a relationship, and that means a percentage. And so loan-to-value ratio, what I would pay attention to and probably highlight or write it in my notes, second line, value is the sales price or the appraised value, whichever one is less. So your second line is really important. The value is considered to be the sales price or the appraised value, whichever is less. So what if you went to the bank and you want to buy a house for $200,000? So that's the sales price, right? And the lender is going to send out an appraiser if you're asking to borrow money, and let's say the appraiser comes back and says it's worth $196,000 instead of $200,000. The lender will not lend you on $200,000, everybody. They're looking out for their risk that they're taking, and they will lend on the $196,000. If the sales price is $200,000, can you still buy the house and just pay the difference? You can, and people do. You know, the appraised value might come in less. That just affects your loan. It doesn't affect what the sales price does, and the buyer can say, I still love this house. I'll bring the extra $4,000 to closing. Or the buyer can say, I just can't swing it. Seller, will you really negotiate and come down on the price? Seller might say, no, I'm not. And so then the deal, if it's in the due diligence period, the buyer can terminate, can't they? All right, so that's your loan to value. Now go back to our math on 424. The answer to 28 is C. Is everybody okay on that now? I want you to look at 29. I showed you how to do interest over the life of the loan, so do number 29 on page 424. Back to that. me write down the formula to help you. Hunter, you're looking up there like, what in the world is that?
Just reset my brain. It's-
I know. To find the interest over the life of the loan, you take the P&I payment, because isn't that the debt service? I beg your pardon. Multiply it by how many times am I paying that? Because if you're paying it X amount of times, there's interest in that payment all those times. So you multiply by the number of payments, and then you minus what you borrowed, because the P&I payment's got the principal in it and the interest. So doesn't it make sense you want to take the principal amount out, and what's left over is the interest you paid to borrow that money, use that money for those amount of years. So what did you multiply? What numbers did you use? What?
1,140.45 times the 30.
That's a trick. How about the P&I payment? That $1,100, guys, that'll trip you up, won't it? The $1,140.45 is the escrow payment. This is the debt service payment, isn't it? So they probably have that answer in the choice, but we're not going to work it that way. We're going to look at the P&I payment, and how many years is it? 30. You can get that payback. How much will I pay back? And you should come up with 366. 282 is the total payback. I reckon that could be a test question. What will you totally pay back to the bank? But this question is, how much interest are you paying? So how much did we borrow? 153. Who said 180? Kim, I'm going to use that as an example too, because in the problem we see the numbers, and you have to make sure what the question is, you're using the proper number. We're paying 180, but we borrowed 153, right? And so you minus what you borrowed, and the difference is the interest. So you're paying more interest than you even borrowed. And if you think about it, the rate's a little bit high, 7%, but you also use the money for 30 years. The lender is there to make a profit, everybody. Tell me if that little formula makes sense. It's easier than what we think, and maybe it feels too easy, maybe, because I think here's what some of you want to do. You want to take the 153 times 7% times 30 years. And the 7% is not has nothing to do with the payment, except for it helps calculate it based on the number of years you use it. So make sure you use the P&I payment times the number of payments, and then you minus the principal amount that you borrowed. Let's look at something else. I'm going to show you, if you'll go with me to page 417, I would like for you to look at an example of amortization. Amortization is a systematic repayment of a debt. So if you look on 417, in the middle, bottom half, you see the math. It says assume the current outstanding balance is $70,000. Do you see that? I want you to read, see that math example. That's an example of amortizing the loan after each payment. And so those are the steps, and I'll put it on the board. There are 4 steps to amortizing a loan. Now, the computer generates the amortization schedule, and lenders oftentimes will give the schedule to the borrower so they can see each payment what your loan's going to be. Because every month you make a payment, you're making a payment on a smaller balance. It goes down a little bit every time you make a payment. The word amort is a Latin word, and it's Latin for to put to death. So we're putting to death this loan slowly, little bit at a time, but it does go down to 0. And so amortize means systematic repayment of the debt. So with every payment you owe less if you're amortizing a loan. So when you start out with what did you borrow and multiply it by the yearly interest rate. Because in this example, we're trying to figure out in this monthly payment, how much of it went to interest this month so we can see what's left over that will kill the debt, lower the principal amount. So we owe 70, our interest is $47.25 for the year based on that. But guys, we're only going to use that for a minute because the balance is $70,000 this month. Next month it'll be less. So you take the yearly interest and divide it by 12. So this month in the payment, the interest is $393.75. Your payment is $454.30. This is P&I. Your P&I payment is $454.30. If you minus the I out of it, it leaves the principal. And so if you minus the interest out this month, based on owing $70,000, then the principal this month out of the payment will go toward the principal. In other words, you bring down what your month's balance was, you minus what you're minusing for principal, paying back the debt, and it leaves you a new balance for next month. Does that make a little sense? My student one time some years ago, she says, gosh, I can't remember those steps, so I figured out a way, MDSS. And so I thought, well, that's pretty clever. First step you multiply, second step you divide, and you subtract the last 2 steps. So it helped her, and I always write it down because I think maybe it could help somebody else. Now what I want you to do is take this new balance and run through those steps to get me the next month's balance. So here's what will be the same. Interest rate's the same. You're going to divide by 12, whatever comes up. The P&I payment is the same every month. That's a fixed rate payment. So start all over. You're going to move this number up to where 70 is and just go through those 4 steps exactly like I did, and you're going to get some different numbers. So take a few minutes and see if that makes sense. Can't believe I found a good black marker. Where's that been, I wonder? How y'all doing on that? Well, let's do it, let's write it on the board. So this month, we owe 69, so I'm gonna put it, let me just put it here, because I got my black pen now. It's 69,939.45. You multiply, because we gotta figure out the interest, don't we? And we have to start with yearly in order to calculate monthly. So times a 0.0675, and the interest on this balance is, did you get 4720 and 91 cents? Now look and compare it to last month. Last month, the yearly interest was a little bit more. This month is a little bit less because we owe less. We're systematically paying down the loan. Now we're going to take that number, divide by 12, and the interest, what did you get on the interest on this? 40 or 41. Not much difference. We said it was a slow death, but at least it's going down some. So there's the interest this month. If we take it away, so here's our payment, and if we minus the 393.41, the principal we pay down this month is 60.89. Real slow death. We bring this number back down, and we minus this interest, this principal this month, and we have a new beginning balance. And did you get 69.8 something?
878.56.
Good. So it's just those steps, and once you know what steps to use, you could just go, you could do it a third time if you wanted to. I think you ought to practice that a little bit, maybe over the weekend, just to kind of get used to how it goes. And if you do it multiple times, you'll understand it. That every time you make a payment, part of the payment goes to interest to the lender, and they're going to take that out first. And then what's left over, they'll apply it toward the principal, so your balance will go down a little bit every month. The lender makes money at the beginning of the loan, everybody. If you lived in that property and kept that loan, the first years, like 18 years, is going to be mainly interest. The lender's going to make money on the front end. It's called profit. It's called yield. They want to yield and profit. They want to make money. They want a rate of return. I'm going to show you something else. And then we're going to talk about discount points. Let me show you. Let me show you how the payment works. When we make our P&I payment each month, and I'm concerned about this because that's the debt service. Maybe you're paying taxes and insurance every month too, but it doesn't have anything to do with your loan amount, does it? When you make your October 1 payment, the interest, the lender says, we're getting the interest out of that payment first, and it will go to the month behind because that month's interest hasn't been paid yet. We call this interest in the arrears. Loans are set up, mortgage loans are set up that are amortized, where you pay the interest after you use it, and then what's left over will bring down your balance in the current month. This interest is behind. It's also called accrued interest. I think 2 C's. So we pay interest after we use it. We do not pay interest in advance except for 2 times. When a buyer pays interest in advance, or a borrower, is when they set their loan up at the beginning. The interest is going to require some days of interest in advance. The other time the buyer pays interest in advance is with discount points. And I'm gonna show you that in a little bit, in just a minute or two. Discount points is interest, everybody. Discount points is interest to the lender, or our interest is our interest to the lender, because they've got to make their profit no matter what. And they will make their profit one way or the other. So when you make your November payment, lender says, interest please for October, because you use those days. Accrued means it's accumulating, and it hasn't been paid yet. What's left over kills the debt in November. December, same thing. You're paying interest the month behind, because we know how many days you used it. If you paid interest in advance, you're paying, you could be paying interest before you even use the money. And so we pay on what we use. And so that's how the payment is amortized, if you will. Go with me to page 412, and let's talk about discount points. Now, I said to you that discount points would be a form of interest. Let's just use it singular for this illustration. Discount point is a little bit of an oxymoron, because when you see or hear the word discount, you're thinking that you're saving money. Well, now I can't say you're not saving money. It feels like you might be saving money, but when someone buys a discount point or pays the lender a discount point because they're charging it, what you have discounted, and the reason you're going to be paying the discount point is you've asked the lender to lower your note rate. So you've asked the lender to lower your note rate so you can have a lesser payment. But the lender still wants the interest that they would have gotten anyway, and so they're not going to lower your note rate and not charge you to do it. So the way they charge to make a lower interest rate to the consumer is to charge them some interest in advance, because the lender's going to get the rate that they want anyway. Let's talk about how that works. The discount point costs something. 1 point cost 1% times the loan amount. So if you borrow $95,000 is the loan amount, and you're buying, or that comes with 1 discount point, that point is costing $950 cash up front, or either roll it into your loan, and then you're paying interest on top of interest. So let's say you go to the bank and you want to borrow $95,000. They quote an interest rate, and you say, will you bring that note rate down? I don't want to pay 5%. Let's go back to our chart, because I think if we look at those numbers, I think it'll help us see, and that was on page 449. So I want us to look at 5%. So the lender says, when you call and ask them about your interest rate, they say that interest rates on a 30-year loan are 5%. Slide your finger over 5% to the right, and the factor is 537, isn't it? So here's what we're doing. And so somebody figure that for me. If I paid the 5%, so let's put that there, for 30 years. If I get that 5% for 30 years, my payment's going to be
5, 10, 36.
how many?
5, 10, 15,
How many?
510.
510? 15 cents. Alrighty, so the buyer says, or the borrower says, I've never paid 5% in my life. I don't want to pay 5%. I don't want to pay it, and it might be the principal of the thing, but I don't want to pay 5%. let's look at the chart. And the lender might say, well, you can buy a point and it will lower your rate by 1/8%. Go down to that 4 7/8. We're discounting the rate, and 1 point, everybody, will discount by 1/8%. So you buy 1 point, it costs 1%, and what it does to the note rate is lowers it 1/8%. So the rate got discounted by 1/8. So 4 7/8, 30 years, 95. What was the factor? 5.3? All right, so what's the payment? 5 what? 03? Oh,
03 and 50 cents.
oh, and 50 cents. All right, now looky there, everybody. If the borrower pays the 5% note rate and just gets over his pride a little bit, the payment will be 5, 10, 15 for principal and interest for 30 years. The buyer says, I don't want to pay that, I want 4 7/8. Now the lender ain't gonna say, okay, we'll give you that. They're gonna say, okay, but you're gonna pay for it because we want to make 5% on our money. And so you can either pay it throughout the loan or you can pay it up front. They're gonna get their money. Does that make sense? So if we get a 4 7/8, the payment factor is lower and the payment will be lower. And how much lower is it? $6 and something?
Not even enough for Chick-fil-A.
Not even enough. Is it 65? $6.65. So it saves $6.65. Well, let's look at how much it costs. It costs $9.50. So you're buying 1 point. The cost of a point is 1% times your loan. So you're giving the lender $950 in cash to lower your payment $6.65. Does that make sense? Doesn't make sense to me. Here's $950 and my payment's going to be $6.65 lower every month. Do this with me. Put $950 in your calculator and then divide it by 6.65. Did you get 142.85? That's months divided by 12. It will take you 12 years, close to 12 years to break even. So $950 doesn't sound like much money, but it's going to take you 12 years to break even, saving $650 a month. Does that make sense to give the bank that money 12 years in advance? It doesn't. Now somebody could argue, well, that's 12 years. 18 years, you're saving $6.65 a month. No, the buyer's not saving money. Think about those 12 years that he could have done something else with his money. It's called the time value of money. The present value of him using the $950. Let me show you. What if we say to the buyer, because they might ask you, what's your opinion? Why don't you borrow $950 less? You've got $950 burning a hole in your pocket, I can tell. Why don't you borrow less? In other words, pay yourself equity. So 95 minus 950 would be how much? 94.50? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Take 94.50, even at 5%, multiply by the factor, and let's get the payment for that. Let's borrow less, because you're going to put down more payment. What's the factor? 537? So the payment at 5%, I'm borrowing less. The payment is 50505, isn't it? Is that what y'all got? 50505. All right, let's put that over here. If I borrow $94.50 and I pay the 5%, My payment will be 50505. How much off is it from giving the bank the money? It's only $1 or something off, isn't it? And you're building equity right out of the chute. Guys, discount points to me don't make sense, but most of us don't understand what it is. And I'll even tell you, I've gotten caught up in it, and I will probably again, if I go to the bank and want to refinance my house, and the lender will say, well, you're gonna have to pay points to do it. Here's my question, what's the bottom line? How much is my house payment? And that's what most people care about. We don't look at what things are costing us in a financial situation. Most of us don't, because we don't understand it. And a lender, really, their job is not to show this all to you. As a consumer, you're supposed to ask the questions, aren't you? They're going to make their money. Does that make sense to you? They're not going to just lower the rate so you can have a lower payment. If the market says they can get 5%, they're going to get it one way or the other. So, discount points, the lender will call them closing costs, and most of us in our brain say, well, there's closing costs when you buy a house. And so we kind of chalk it up to that. But if we really understand, you're giving the lender interest in advance. And so why would we want to pay for something in advance? And the odds of you living there 12 years, you would have paid them interest and you might not even be there, right? But see, here's the problem on this example. $950 doesn't sound like much money, does it? But if you pay yourself, you're building equity. Equity is the difference between the value minus what you owe. Let me tell you a few more things about discount points. Every point is 1%. So if you get a math problem and it says there are 2 discount points, then that means 2%. Times the loan, if they're asking you for the cost. If they say, what did 2 points do to the note rate? This changes. It dropped it 2/8. So what it does to the interest rate is the 1/8. What it does as far as cost is the 1%. So if you're buying 2 points, this turns into 2% times your loan amount. If you're buying 2 points, then what it did to your note rate was lower it by 2/8%, which is 1/4. But it's costing you 2%. And the lender, when they get that money, this yield goes back to the lender. They get their 2/8 when you pay the 2%. So they're making it one way or the other. Does that make a little bit of sense? There is one more thing. Most lenders will charge what they call a loan origination fee. And most often, in our math problems anyway, we'll see where it says the lender is charging 1% loan origination fee. Guys, you calculate it the same way, but the loan origination fee is an administrative cost. It isn't going to do anything to your interest rate. Comments or questions on that? Go with me. Let's see how we did. Go back to page 424. And I'd like you to look at numbers 25 and 26. And if you write down the T-bar, that might help you. Because a lot of your finance math is, you can put it in the T. if we know discount points really are percentages, when we talk about the cost of it, that will help you. So for number 25, when it says you're borrowing 120, well, we know that goes here. And they're asking what would be the charge of those 3 discount points. Well, the 3 discount points turns into 3%. 3% times what you borrow, the discount points will be 3,600. Does that make sense? The cost of a point, 1 point is 1%, 3 points is 3%. So you multiply to get the smaller number, the cost of those 3 points. The next question said, well, the cost of the points would be $2,700, and you borrowed $90,000. So you're really looking for the points, which will come out as a rate in your, or decimal in your calculator. So in your T, the small number is the numerator, as if it's a fraction. That would be put in the calculator first. Always remember, in the T, the little number goes in first. And if you divide it by 90,000, it comes out 0.03. Now, that's not the answer, because they said how many points. And so you know by now that that would be 3 discount points. But if you're trying to figure out the cost of it, you turn it into a percent, wouldn't you? And multiply it by 90,000. So they paid 3 discount points, and it cost them $2,700 on that $90,000 loan. Does that make sense? You might have to go back and kind of read over it a little bit, but as far as math goes for your final, there really is not that much finance math on your final exam, and even probably at the state exam, but you do need to know how interest works. You do need to know about loan origination fees and discount points, because we're going to have math problems like number 27. It'll be more involved than 27, but the bottom line question is, how much money will the lender be paid in fees? And so you need to know how to get the loan amount. And when they gave you the LTV, we learned that earlier. And then when they say there's a 1% loan origination, and then there are 2 discount points, we know really the lender's charging 3% for loan fees. Does that make sense? 1% loan origination just to originate the loan, and then 2 discount points because of the interest rate. And so can't you just say 3%? You can add those together. So the question is, how much will the lender be paid in fees? Well, that would be the fees, wouldn't it? 3%. The $400 is the lawyer fee. So you just have to read carefully and calculate the loan amount, and then calculate 3% of it. One more thing, everybody, because we all have a little deal going here. So let's go to page 409. Is it 409 or 401 that's the car? 409? Isn't there an old-timey car or a song, My Little 409? Y'all are too young. Too young. I said page 409. I want to talk to you about these,
I was thinking of a cleaning chemical for it.
Oh, well, maybe that's it. The clauses in a note, this is a level 1 section, but it's also a good testing area. So if the borrower defaults on their loan, the lender can accelerate, speed up the maturity date. In other words, it's due. So acceleration is triggered if the borrower defaults. Now, we know they can default by not making their payment. That's the most common. But what if they don't pay their taxes? What if they don't maintain the property because it's the collateral for the lender? The next clause that may be in a loan is the prepayment penalty. Most loans honestly don't have a prepayment penalty. FHA and VA loans don't. Now, some loans, once in a while, you might see it, but the attorney and the lender both would disclose that if there's a prepayment penalty. The third clause in a note is called the alienation clause, or the due on sale. We know the term alienation means transfer. We talked about that earlier when we were talking about the loan assumption, and we talked about that term in the context of Unit 5, transferring title. Alienation means transfer. If you transfer your loan without the lender's approval, they can call it due upon the sale. So if you get a question, and it's likely something like, which clause is triggered if the borrower transfers their loan without the lender's permission? A, due on sale, B, alienation, C, both, or D, neither. And guys, it's both, because it says alienation and due on sale are the same. You alienate, it's due. Now, conventional loans I mentioned to you are not assumable, and so conventional loans would have this alienation clause. We said that FHA and VA loans are assumable as long as the buyer qualifies. By the way, the deed of trust we mentioned is the collateral instrument. So when the borrower signs that deed of trust, that will be put on record. That's the security for the loan. When the borrower signs the promissory note, that note doesn't get recorded because it's the details of their payment plan. But that's the obligation, or the financial obligation on the loan. Only the buyer, or let's say it this way, only the borrower would sign those two instruments. You could be asked, does the lender sign either one of those? And the answer is no. The lender doesn't sign it. It's the borrower who's giving, right? And they are going to be the ones signing those documents. All righty, everyone. Any questions on this unit? Now, there are a couple of things that we're not going to go over tonight, but let me just show you. And if you'll go with me to page 414, there are some payment plans that the borrower can choose from. I suspect the fixed rate level payment is pretty much what folks love. Most people don't like to take the risk. Is my payment going to be more or less? They kind of like knowing what it is, but so those are a couple of different payment alternatives. So if you read over them, they'll make sense. Interest only is not amortized. An interest-only loan doesn't go down every month because you're not paying toward the principal. An interest-only loan would be like a builder borrowing money to build a house. Why would they care if their loan goes down a little month for 9 months? You know, they don't care. They just want to use the money and pay interest on it as they go. And you all have heard of adjustable rate payment plans. The rate will adjust in certain time frames, and it will adjust according to some kind of an index. And the index oftentimes is the Treasury bill. And it will adjust, the payment will adjust because the interest rate adjusts. And then you've got a few more on page 416. Any questions or comments?